Welcome to Ultra Pro Wrestling. Hello and welcome to the Untitled Wrestling Podcast. My name is Troy and I am joined by the ever delightful Jay Luft. And today we have a very special guest, but not the usual type of guest that you may have come to expect on the podcast. From Hyperfocus Games, this is Sam Vallely. How are you doing, mate?
Hey, I'm doing good.
Good man. Thank you for joining us. So tell us a little bit about yourself, about Hyperfocus Games and you know why we've got you on here. What is it you're doing?
So I'm a game developer for Hyperfocus Games. We are developing a new wrestling game called Ultra Pro Wrestling. I don't know. Where do we go from there?
So how did Hyperfocus Games come about? Before we kind of get into the meat of things, give us a little bit of an overview on Hyperfocus Games.
Sure. Well, I'm an independent game developer. I've been developing video games for close to 10 years, maybe more than 10 years. Started off just developing little 2D games for iPhone and things like that. Eventually got to the point where, and I'd never done a 3D game, but I ended up communicating with this company, a Scottish company. I won't say their name just in case I get in trouble for that, but
No problem.
There's a Scottish wrestling company, which most people are aware of. I ended up going to develop a game for them. Started off as a 2D game. It evolved into a 3D game and kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger. Things sort of fell apart. I ended up taking a couple of years away from the game. So I'd actually, this Ultra Pro Wrestling had already been developed for a couple of years. The creator wrestler system was quite far along. All the menu systems were done. There was a start of a career mode, and we started working on animations and moves and started attacking the gameplay. Everything fell apart and that game got kind of shelved, and then I went and did a bunch of other things, and eventually I couldn't leave that game alone because I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. It's my passion. It's probably, I can't think of anything that I've loved more throughout my life than wrestling. So, eventually I just had to go back to it. And one of the things that I think stopped me from going back to it was the fact that I wouldn't be able to have any licensed characters. It would have to be all completely fictional characters. And that initially made me think, people won't be interested in that, you know. That I put it off for a while, but I don't know, it just kept eating away at me. And I've got such a love for those N64 games that's what the gameplay was kind of trying to replicate. So eventually I just got to the point, I said, you know what, it doesn't matter if fictional characters, people are probably going to create their own anyway. So as long as the gameplay is good, as long as that core engine is a good wrestling engine, and also there's a part of me that's kind of like, I don't care if anyone else likes it. If I like it, I'm almost making the game just for me, so that I can play it. And but hopefully, there's enough people out there that think the way I do about wrestling games, have a love that I have for those AKI games, and so that was a couple of years ago now. I started going back to it, but again, I couldn't go back to it full time. it was just sort of a side project. A lot of the work that had been done had to be undone. And about 8 months ago is when I decided that this has to be my full-time project. This has to be the one thing that I do. I can't do other things. I have to concentrate fully on this. So borrowed a little bit of money, got an office, managed to get some friends interested in helping out. We're at the point now where, as you see behind me, we've got this office. It's not very big, but we got it for a good price. And actually now, through Patreon, and in large part because of Dickey, the rent for the office is now being covered almost entirely from Patreon.
Oh, wow.
So that's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so yeah, we've just been working the last 8 months, just working solid. Me especially, I've been working 7 days a week for the last 8 months, and for the last 4 weeks trying to get ready for this trailer. Mm-hmm. I've been working from 9 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the morning, just about every day. So the last couple of days, last 3 or 4 days, I've been able to relax a bit from that. But yeah, sorry, I know I'm throwing everything at you here, but
no, not at all, man. It's all good to hear. It's nice to hear that, you know, a real passion project and it's really coming to fruition. And, you know, these things have their stumbling blocks and their hurdles and this, that, and the other, but, you know, you've persevered through it. And to your point, it's one of those things where you come away from it and you think, oh, I'll leave it or I'll come back to it at a later date, but it keeps eating away. And you know that if that's what it's doing, if it is eating away, then that's something that you really need to attack. That's something that, you know, it's something that needs to be finished. So hats off to you, man. Like it looks like a great space you've got there. You've got some friends involved, and that's another thing similar to how we started this podcast. It was kind of a passion of several of ours to do something like this, but it was just getting the right people on board, carving out the time for it, the space, all of this, that, and the other. So it's incredible to see. Really, really good. So we'll talk a little bit more about the game and the development of that a little later on, but we'll jump in some questions. You mentioned you've been a lifelong wrestling fan. How did you get into wrestling? What are your earliest memories of that? And you know,
I actually only started thinking about this recently because I was asked that question recently, and my first sort of memory that really stuck out when I was watching wrestling as a kid is the barbershop scene with Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty.
Yeah.
And I ended up speaking to my brother. It was basically, my brother's a couple of years older than me. And so he got into wrestling very early on. Like he must have been like 4 or 5 or something. And that wrestling just was his main passion. So me being a couple of years younger than him, I don't really remember ever not being a wrestling fan. And I was thinking the other day, my earliest memory, actually, I don't know, I've just got this vague memory of Demolition, Axe and Smash coming down the aisle and the music playing, and God, I don't know what age I would have been, but I must have been tiny. But no, my brother. I remember one year. This is probably actually what sparked it. One year at Christmas. So my brother, he was the big wrestling fan, but I liked it too. One year at Christmas, he got a box full of loose wrestling toys, all the Hasbro ones. Mm-hmm. And of course, looking back now, you go, oh, they were all just crammed in a box. They were obviously like secondhand. We didn't know that at the time. We were just, oh, cool wrestling toys. But I didn't get any wrestling stuff. And I remember, like, I actually remember saying to my mom, I was like, why didn't you get me any? I like wrestling too. So I think from there on, I sort of had like a little thing with my brother where I was like, no, you think you're the big wrestling fan. I'm the big wrestling fan. I'm the one who likes it the most. And so, yeah, I kind of
classic sibling rivalry.
yeah. I always wanted to show like my parents that I was the biggest wrestling fan. Mm-hmm. So I tried to love it more than he did, you know. But yeah, he had all the videotapes, all the VHS, all the I still remember the front cover of the WCW videotapes that we had. And so yeah, just I don't really remember a time before wrestling, you know. As I said, that Shawn Michaels Marty Jannetty barber scene shop, that's the thing that like really stuck out, that really like imprinted on me.
Real iconic.
That's when I realized, I was like, oh, this Shawn Michaels guy, I like him. Like, even though he just beat up Mark Tenay. But yeah, there's just something about him. I just thought he was the coolest guy in the world. But yeah.
Is it a running thing with Scotsmen that they love Shawn Michaels? Because Aaron, that we do the podcast with, is obsessed with Shawn Michaels. Like,
Yeah,
it's his favorite wrestler of all time. Like, I don't know.
I don't know. He was my guy growing up.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know.
Good stuff. So let's chat a little bit about the game. So when did you first come up with the concept for Ultimate Pro Wrestling? I know you mentioned a little bit about that earlier, but talk to us a little bit more about that if you can.
Yeah, so as I said, the game was sitting on the shelf. It was originally developed to be a game for a promotion with actual wrestlers. I'd love to name drop a few of them, but I can't. So yeah, there was a bunch of guys that were in the game that were all 3D modeled, and it was good progress. But anyway, that all kind of fell apart. The game sat on the shelf for a couple of years, and then at some point I just decided, no, I'll make fictional characters. So of course, then I'm thinking, well, now I need to come up with not just a bunch of fictional characters. I need a new name for the game. I need all this new stuff. So the game actually went through a bunch of different iterations. Yeah, God, there was Wrestling Heroes at one point. It was it was called Death League at one point. Yeah, and it was basically going to be the same wrestling game, but not really in a wrestling environment. And it was kind of almost going for a sort of Japanese anime sort of look. And I think the idea was going to be that it could have been a comic book as well. It could have been a manga. It could have been an anime TV show. And so I had this whole backstory behind it. But then that eventually got scrapped because I was like, no, I just want it to be what AKI was, And of course, the name actually kind of came about because, well, the Japanese version of those games is Virtual Pro Wrestling. So I like the something pro wrestling as a kind of nod to Virtual Pro Wrestling. Well, what can I call it that's not Virtual Pro Wrestling? And of course, the development name for the Nintendo 64 when that was being developed was the Ultra 64.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, this game is a callback to the N64 games, so it should be Ultra Pro Wrestling. It makes sense. It just ties Virtual Pro Wrestling to the N64 development name. It just brings it all together, and it's just the kind of perfect name for it. So yeah, it became Ultra Pro Wrestling, and then I don't know. I just started kind of going from there. I just started theorizing about all the different promotions and how it would work in the same way that there's not some big backstory. It kind of just works the same way that the AKI game will work. But like if you play like WCW versus the World or versus NWO World Tour, it's like I love that they had all the different promotions. You had like WCW, and then of course you had NWO, but you also had like the independents and the deathmatch environment, and just the idea of like being able to go between these different promotions. And I mean, you look back now at the N64, and it's like the differences aren't too much. They're kind of just color palette changes, but still, it's like, I don't know. There's just something like that independence arena where you've got the hardwood floor. There's just something about that. I don't know.
You see that in like certainly the 2K games, the WWE ones, where I don't know if it's the last one or the one before, it might have been 2K20 maybe, but they introduced that kind of storyline where you wrestled through the independent circuits, and it was a lot of gym halls with the bleachers and the hardwood floors and stuff like that. It's nice. It mixes stuff up. It gives it a different feel. So
yeah, and I don't know about now. Obviously, I'm not too familiar with the more recent WWE games, but I remember one of them where they had a sort of independent environment, but it was still that big arena.
Yeah,
it was just
just a giant gym hall.
Yeah. So yeah,
nice. So you spoke about it being very much a callback to those kind of AKI like N64 era of games. Why specifically that? Why not other ones that come to mind? SmackDown versus Raw, SmackDown Just Bring It, all of those sorts of ones. Why specifically the N64 kind of style?
Well, I might I might annoy some people by saying this, but I hated the SmackDown games when they first came out. And one of the reasons was that it was actually nothing really to do. When I look back on it, it was nothing to do with SmackDown. It was just the fact that SmackDown came out in the PlayStation. I already had the N64, and I wanted my friends to play the N64 game.
Right.
And so when they got SmackDown, I was like, fuck that game. Like, what are you playing that for? And I'd overly criticize it, and but I guess that's what it was. It was like that's when I think about gaming and I think about wrestling. There's probably the multiplayer aspect of it, because I'm thinking games prior to that. I mean, I guess you did have multiplayer, on the SNES and the Mega Drive and all that stuff. Yeah, you could play a one-on-one match, but there was just something about those N64 games that just kind of really turned it up. And the memories I've got of sitting in the bedroom with my brother and with our friends. And, with the N64, which is something that the PlayStation didn't have, the 4 controllers.
Mm-hmm. I've got one sat right there. I'm looking at it. I'm like, 4 ports. I didn't even have to buy a multi-tap.
Yeah. That was the thing with the PlayStation as well. You could upgrade it. You had the multi-tap. I remember my friend had the thing where it was like, you could play like pirate games and all this stuff, and his PlayStation just looked like crazy. And I just remember thinking, Nintendo would never do that. But no, so it was just those memories of sitting in the bedroom where all 4 of us are there. We're playing, we're going between, a match where we're all against each other, a tag team match, just all the different match types playing against each other. And there was just something just amazing about it, like, and especially with No Mercy as well, because like I always felt that game really, it was easy enough to pick up and play. Like, if you didn't necessarily have to like button bash, but like you could kind of work out, okay, well, this button hits, this button grabs. It wasn't overly complicated. Mm-hmm. But if you got really good at the game, I felt like it really rewarded the skill, like the timing of the reversals and the dodges and everything like that. I feel like that game just, and then if you get 2 guys that are really good at that game, I mean, you can have a match that's like an hour long, and every near fall just feels like epic, whereas like when I don't know, I never really saw that with my friends playing the early SmackDown games. I never saw like these big epic brawls. It all just felt a bit kind of clunky. And like an example would be, when you do a move off the top, if you go to do a splash off the top, I'm going to end up getting my figures out to show.
Go ahead, man.
No, I don't have anything here. But it's like, I'll use my vape pen. So if you do a splash off the top and No Mercy, if you mistime it if you don't understand this guy's recovery, that he's about to get up, and you jump and then he starts his recovery, it doesn't matter if you connect with him. That recovery counts as he's recovered. You've missed your chance. Mm-hmm. Whereas like in SmackDown, the guy will be getting up, he'll be fully standing, and you'll be doing a leg drop, and you'll still crash into him and send him flying. I just, that was too chaotic for me. Mm. Like I needed more rigid kind of rules, like, so I always saw the SmackDown games as very kind of just like, sometimes I describe them as being like not wrestling games, but like fighting games that happen to take place in a wrestling ring. Mm-hmm. And I know some people won't like that, and I'm sorry, but that's just like how I saw them,
No, I understand that. Like,
they refer to them as like simulation anyway, don't they? Not like wrestling games. Which is
the 2K games are. I was actually just talking about this, especially now with the you guys will have seen there was a clip. It was RVD and John Cena, and it actually takes you from the match into the
cutscene.
And so, and to be fair, like that's fair enough. That's fine if you want a WWE simulator. That's great. They do it well. It looks awesome, but it's just not what I want from a wrestling game. I like to have the control of everything. In fact, a good example is when The Rock does the people's elbow. In a lot of games, I noticed that you just basically had to do the combination or whatever it was to do the finisher, and it plays out like this big cutscene, and he does the whole, takes the elbow up, and then he runs off both sides, and you're just sitting there with the controller just waiting on this animation.
Got him.
But whereas in No Mercy, of course, that button will only get you so far. You push that button and he takes off the elbow pad and then he starts running and then you're back in control. You know, you have to, if you want to run over the top, you have to hold down the run button.
Got to see that process through.
Yeah. Come back. If you want to land the elbow drop, you have to push it at the right time. If you miss time it and fuck up, like you'll hit the guy. So I love that. I love just the whole, it's down to you. It's your responsibility to play the game to the best of your ability.
It's only when you like talking about it now, like retrospectively, you realize just how innovative like stuff like that was at the time. You kind of take it for granted and you think, gosh, there's games now that aren't even doing that. Like they're still just reliant on, okay, I've pushed that and that's the move. I can watch it play out. Whereas having to do each little intrinsic part is awesome. To just touch on the point you mentioned a moment ago, Jay, about like the difference between simulation. I've always preferred a more arcade style of game. And for me, a lot of those No Mercy ones and the N64 type ones and this, that, and the other were very arcadey, very easy to pick up and play. And a comparison me, not so much now, but I think certainly back in the day was the difference between FIFA and Pro Evo. And FIFA always felt like a simulation. Pro Evo always felt very arcadey, very pick up and play. Like I could feel like I would walk into an arcade and be able to play something more like Pro Evo or ISS as it was back in the day than something like FIFA. So I agree with you. Whilst I enjoyed a lot of the SmackDown games and stuff like that, that feel of just pick up and play, like it felt like a real party game, didn't it? Those older 64 ones.
Yeah. And as I said, like when I'd sit down with someone who'd never played it before, they were able to kind of get to grips with it fairly quickly. But at the same time, if you're a skilled enough player, like there's no amount of button bashing that will save you. I've got a good friend actually who's very, very into Tekken. And he goes off to these competitions and he does so well. He either always comes first or second in these Tekken competitions. He's really good at it and he loves it. And I'd never really played Tekken other than maybe the first one. Like, you know, I played a little bit of that, but I just never really played it. So we're at his house one day. I didn't know what I was doing and I was just pushing anything and I beat him. And he was not happy about it. You know, he was kind of like, you could just see his kind of face go like, all right, okay, yeah. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just pushing, like, you know. And so, but the thing is, that's possible to happen in a lot of games where you don't know what you're doing and you just happen to push the right button at the right time. Whereas, like when I compare that to those No Mercy games, I just don't think. I mean, I could be wrong, but I just don't think that's possible. I don't think because of the sort of strategy, the skill of the timing and all that stuff. I don't think it's possible for anyone to be up. Also, as well, to be fair, Tekken matches are very quick, so a match could you could lock out a match, but with No Mercy and stuff like that, when the matches are like 20 minutes long, it's much harder for a lot to kind of come through. Maybe that's what it is. But I just always felt like, if you give the controller to someone who doesn't know what they're doing, I'll block and I'll dodge every single attack. Like, you know, so I just always like that kind of rewarding the skillful play.
Put your friend in touch with Jay. He's a big Tekken fan as well. I remember the first and probably only time that I beat you, and it was a fairly similar reaction, albeit only by voice. I couldn't see your face, but I could tell the disappointment. I
wasn't. Yeah, I'm not that good at Tekken. You said about like timing and mistiming before. Just kind of like leads into this next question. So on the promotions part of the Kickstarter, there's like mention of like crowds reacting to mistimed moves. What kind of like how will the crowd reactions like influence actual like how matches play out?
Yeah, I mean a lot of that still needs to be programmed, but the idea behind it is that, you know, if you I'm trying to think of an example of like a botch within a match, but the idea is that if you're in an independent promotion, now obviously in the wrestling game you're not really going to have botches, but let's say, as an example, let's say you run and you do like a clothesline and the guy's nowhere near you. Let's say something like that, you know. And maybe that's not a great example, but just something that doesn't look right in the game. Maybe the crowd will have a kind of weird reaction to that, because you want to invoke the sort of you effed up chance things
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that. So it's trying to think of how do you do that, or well, perhaps a better example is because I'm trying to think of how it works in a gaming context, and maybe it's just you dive, you do a splash, and let's say, oh well, the guy's too far away from you, and so you just do that dive, which happens in No Mercy sometimes. You've got a character that doesn't have a good reach, and you go for the dive, and the guy hasn't moved, but you just didn't reach him. So something like that is perfect for the crowd to then start the "you effed up" chant, and a lot of that plays into. It doesn't necessarily affect the flow of the match. It might be the case that your spirit gets lowered because you missed the move, but not necessarily because the crowd's reacting the way they are.
Right.
The crowd reaction is more tied to that'll have an effect on your popularity, which more that goes into the career mode aspect of it. Because in a regular match, outside of the career mode, you don't really have this popularity meter or anything like that. But in the career mode, you'll have a popularity, and that's how you kind of get through the ranks and all this stuff. You might even have like a backstage popularity, which can also. So you'll have an on-screen popularity and a backstage popularity, and those two together will create situations and present opportunities, or people. If you're in a tag team and your popularity is outweighing your tag team partners, that might be the thing. That,
friction, baby.
Yeah.
Backstage politics.
Yeah.
That's cool. That sounds like a really cool mechanic. We heard you talk about how the game kind of came up to the point it is, and the iterations and hurdles and stuff that you had to go through. Can you talk to us a little bit about the actual process of making the game kind of as it is now? Myself and Jay, no idea about the process of making a game. All the way from kind of the creation of the environments to the characters to the physics and stuff like that. Like, where'd you start with that? Like, talk us through the process a little bit if you can.
Well, I'm trying to think of where I actually started with this game, because, as I said, it started out as something else, and it actually started out as a 2D game. So some of the menu systems and everything carried over from when it was a 2D game. But in terms of creating a 3D environment, that's what I've got some bad habits as a developer, because usually developers will make an environment and they'll have it like all the textures they'll use like a grid system, and they'll get the resolution right for all the different textures from where the camera angle is going to be and all this stuff. Whereas I can't help but go to the first thing I want to do is I want to see RVD in the ring. I want to see the ECW logo on the mat. So I'll spend a bit of time creating doing the 3D modeling, creating the environment, and then I'll get halfway through that, and then I'm like, oh no, now I need to go make this ECW texture to see what that looks like, because I just want to see it like instantly, So so yeah, I spend a lot of time. I go between things. I tend not to. It's not like one day I'll do programming, one day I'll do animation, one day I'll do modeling. I'll probably spend. I'll go into programming mode, and then I'll spend like a month doing nothing but programming, and then I'll come out of programming mode, and then I'll spend a month doing nothing but animation, and then I'll come out of there, because I've basically got the base 3D models done for a sort of base environment. The wrestling ring. Well, I mean, it's all in the trailer now as well. We've got wrestling ring, we've got different types of wrestling ring. So in terms of 3D modeling, once you get to that point, that can be kind of put on the shelf. I don't need to do any more modeling. That can kind of be put to the back of my mind for a while. But then I take all those models, and now I need to do programming to sort of set up collider boxes so that the guy knows where the ropes are, he knows where the guardrails are, how he reacts to them and all this stuff. So, and of course you need him to be walking around, which is then it's like, oh, well, you can't just have him. You could just have him moving around, but me being me, I was like, no, I have to have him animated. I have to have him actually walking. So I needed him to be animated walking before I wanted to test any of the collision detection on things. So I'm
Gotta walk before you can run.
yeah. So yeah, I'm very unorganized in the way that I approach things, because I'm very like, I want to see this thing first. Whereas like, you know, if it was a bigger game studio, there'd be lots of rules and regulations about the order in which you're meant to develop things. But yeah, so one thing just now is so like, for instance, one of the things I've been programming is getting the mechanics right for climbing up the turnbuckle and jumping off, doing splashes. But it's like, you can't really program that until the animations are done. Right. You know, until you actually have the animation of him doing the splash, you can't program him. You could, but you know, it's just you're going to be flying blind. So so right now, the main focus just now is the animations, because once the animations, and we've got through quite a few, but once the animations are done, it'll be so much easier to help just every other aspect of the gameplay. Yeah, because even just like, you know, going from switching from a lock up to grabbing them from behind, it's like, well, you need the animation in order to know if you've done that right before you can think about how it feels pressing that button, you know, on that end. So yeah, yeah. There's obviously just a lot that goes into it. It's, you know, it's 3D modeling, it's programming, it's animation, texturing, and then I guess planning is a part of it as well. But I tend not to really think about that too much.
What about? Sorry to butt in. I was going to ask, you mentioned like a few aspects of it there. What about sound and stuff like that? Like, do you go out and kind of collect Foley sound, or like, how does that whole process kind of go?
I've got one of my guys, Stephen. That's all he does is sound engineering, nice. And he's been doing it for a lot of years. So when it comes to sound, all that stuff, I leave everything to him. We've got a guy who's on YouTube called Vince McSham. And he's actually really good at doing voiceovers, and you know, he does great impressions of like Howard Finkel and nice. Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon as well. So I think he's going to come in quite handy. He's actually on the trailer. He's the one that says "Welcome to Ultra Pro Wrestling." Ah,
nice.
Yeah, and so I think he's going to be coming quite handy whenever we need kind of voice work and stuff like that. But yes, Steven's my sound guy that he basically does, and the music as well. All the music done on the trailer was this guy Steven Jurek.
Oh, fantastic! Shout out, good man, awesome.
Yeah. So when you were saying about planning, where did you come up with like the kind of ideas for the characters and the promotions? Was it just like a lot of it kind of like actual wrestlers and actual promotions? I know from looking at it was a House of Honor that. You can see that's like 2005, like ROH CZW, like straight away. That's what I was like, took me back to that like whole gang war thing. I was like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
What kind of like influenced you for all of that?
Well, yeah. So yeah, the House of Honor is like just a total mashup between the kind of hardcore and the Ring of Honor. But I didn't realize until after I'd sent the trailer out, because it's supposed to be an American independent show, that I used the British spelling of honor. So that's a little mistake. I didn't notice. Yeah, I'd already sent the trailer out, and I'm watching it back for the 500th time, and my girlfriend walks past and she's like, you know, that's not how Americans spell honor. And I'm like, what? No, so which of course, I mean, I should have known, like Ring of Honor, of course it looks different, yeah. But anyway, no, the characters, they're pretty much like, as I said, I've been a wrestling fan my whole life. When we were growing up, I actually wanted to be a wrestler at one point. That was like my dream, you know. But before that, I'd spent my whole childhood, you know, backyarding, wrestling with friends and stuff like that. And so these are just characters that we came up with back then. So almost all of the characters there, some are new, but almost all of them are creations from our childhood. The main guy that you see, the first guy with the title when the trailer comes on, that's Big Ben Nevis, and that's my brother. He's Ben, and that's
nice.
Well, he's a couple of years older than us, but he had a growth spurt, and so he was twice the size of all of us when we were like, so he was just like this monster, you know. So yeah, he was Big Ben Nevis, and so yeah, of course I had to put him in the game, and then some of the other ones, Johnny Cougar. Yeah, he's my childhood friend. Been friends with him since I was 5 years old. We we actually, to be completely honest, me and my friend Johnny Cougar, whose real name is Gerald,
No.
we grew up. Our wrestling names that we had for years, we actually couldn't use because my wrestling name, my wrestling name was Sam Michaels, and his was Gerald Giannetti. So, so you know, that was out the window. So, but you know, aside from Sam Michaels and Gerald Giannetti, my main gimmick character for years was Chad Maverick, and he was Johnny Cougar. So yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, definitely have to put them in the game.
Chad Maverick's such a throwback name as well. It reminds me of was it the Southpaw regional wrestling thing WWE did? It was just like the corniest, like 80s sounding names.
Yeah. I'll tell you how I came up with Chad Maverick, because it's kind of a funny story there as well. So there was a time in wrestling where everybody in the independents was using the last name Phoenix. There was so many Phoenixes, and I get it, it's this cool sounding name, Phoenix, and when no one else was using it, it was cool, but then there was just loads of people that ended up using Phoenix. And so I just started thinking, oh, Maverick's a name I've not really heard. You know, you don't really hear that in wrestling much. Now I think there is a couple, but back then, or Drake Maverick, and there's another one as well. But back when I came up with this, there was no Mavericks. Maverick just wasn't a thing. So I was like, right, but I didn't have a first name. Didn't have a first name for years, and I really liked the name Maverick. And one of my friends, I ended up watching TV with him, and his wrestling name was Alex Sonics, right? And so he was Alex for years. And we end up watching Jean-Claude Van Damme, Double Impact. And of
Great
course,
film.
in that film, he plays twins. And we're watching the film, and we realize one of the twins is called Alex, which is his wrestling name.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to be a tag team. And I was like, oh my God, what's the other twin called? What's the other twin called? We were like going through it. What was it? Chad. Oh, okay. Chad and Alex. And then I started thinking, Chad Maverick, and it just, it was like, that's it, perfect. So
it's got a ring to
it. Yeah. So I was Chad Maverick for years. Another funny story, I actually legally changed my name to Chad Maverick.
What?
I was legally known as Chad Maverick for probably close to 10 years or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit crazy, but
amazing. That's really cool.
So yeah, the characters, they're fictional, but there is actually like a bit of a backstory to all of them. So obviously people outside of my circle of friends are not really going to get that, but for us it's fun.
It's nice to get that little insight there.
yeah,
that's cool.
Actually, can I give one more shout out as well? Actually, because there's a guy who's obviously based on a real person. His character in the game is Mad Tam. So this is my friend Thomas, and he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, and he's a big wrestling fan as well. And he actually a few years ago he went kind of semi-viral because he was the first person that I've been aware of anyway that did a sunset flip in an actual contested jiu-jitsu match.
Oh wow!
The guy was going for his legs, and he did a sunset flip, and it got caught on camera. And that video it's been seen, I think, I don't know, a few 100,000 times as well, which is, it's big for him. Like that's his kind of claim to fame. He did a sunset flip.
Find that clip. I'm going to drop it in right here.
Yeah, I'll need to find it. I was looking for it the other day. I know he knows where it is. It's on some website, but yeah. So that's cool. So he's in the game as well. He's Mad Tam.
So what are your aspirations for the game and beyond?
Honestly, I'm trying to just make it the best game it could possibly be. Like I keep getting, I've got a page on the Discord that's all people submitting moves that they want to be in the game. And, from my point of view, it's like, definitely whatever, there might have to be a limit somewhere, but I'm happy to put in any move that people want, So the priority, first of all, is to try and sort of reproduce all the moves that are in the AKI games. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we'll kind of look at those moves and see what we can do with them. Like I was saying this the other day, there's like No Mercy has the frog splash. but it's Eddie Guerrero's Frog Splash. So I would have that in the game, but I need to make RVD's Frog Splash, which is just a little bit different, you know. So oh god, yeah, like going back to when I was young playing those games, like the Van Terminator was a move I always wanted in those games. That now it's like, oh, I'm going to have the chance to do that. I'm going to be able to make the Van Terminator in that game. So I get really excited about. There's a Japanese wrestler. I can't remember his name now. Sugi. I think he maybe went by Dragon Kid at one point. He's had like a whole bunch of gimmicks. But there's a compilation video of him and the stuff he does. Like he does almost like a Van Terminator, but he runs along the ropes. He runs along the top rope.
Oh wow!
And then lands the guy. He does like a 619 on the top rope. Like he just does, he just does the craziest.
Yeah.
So there's a big mashup compilation of him.
Nice.
That I've loved that video for years. And I'm like, yeah, every one of his moves are going in the game. I'm taking them off.
Nice. Yeah. I've got two shouts if you're taking moves to go in the game. I think Jay will agree on one of them. The Rainmaker, Okada's Rainmaker, would be quite nice. And a Tour of the Islands as well is always a nice finisher to see.
Right, yeah. Well, I actually have a list with like a spreadsheet. I'm basically just going to put in. I'll stick them in.
Nice.
As I said,
pile drivers for me.
Any version of a pile driver.
Variation of pile drivers for me. Ideally, the Awful Waffle, because that's like my favorite.
I might have to do the. Sorry to keep going back to RVD, but like, you know, the way he sells that pile driver, there's that clip.
Yeah.
Where he's like,
yeah.
That would be pretty cool.
So with like the like support for the game after releases, they're going to be like a kind of roadmap of what you're planning on doing, or you not kind of cross that bridge yet?
There's not really so much in the way of a roadmap, other than there is to do with the career mode, because I think the way the career mode works is it's going to be broken up kind of into chapters. So like one chapter will be the 80s, and then another chapter will be the 90s, and then the 90s. So I don't think we're going to be able to have all of them by the time we release. So the first chapter, the 80s, that'll be there, but then the 90s and the 90s and whatever else, that'll have to come later as an update. But yeah, I just the way I'm looking at it is I don't want to do sequels. I don't want it to be a case of, because it's one thing I don't like about the WWE games is that every single year they put out a game, and you know, it gets to be kind of like the FIFA games where
it's just a different skin on the same engine.
Yeah.
But you're paying £70 for the privilege every year.
Yeah. So no, I'm not a fan of that. I like what M. Dickey does. M. Dickey is just constantly updates its game, and that's just what I want to do. I want to have it's one game. I'm a big fan of the Hitman games. I don't know if you guys play Hitman games.
Yes.
But yeah, I remember like when they sort of relaunched it and it was just called Hitman. That was their initial intention, was that there wasn't going to be a Hitman 2 and Hitman 3. It was supposed to just be, here's Hitman, and every so often we'll release more levels, more content, more weapons, more costumes, everything like that. And they ended up it ended up not happening. But that's the way I think games should be, especially in this era where it's like you can just download updates so easily. It doesn't really have to be like, you know, Ultra Pro Wrestling 2024, 2025. You don't have to do it that way.
I think unless you're overhauling like the entire engine and this, that, and the other.
Yeah, like if
there's not really any necessity in it.
Yeah, if there was a new game engine or a new console came out and the hardware was just revolutionary and it required like a complete overhaul, then fair enough. But outside of that, I don't think you need. And I'd feel like you were fleecing the audience just by every single year.
Yeah.
Hey, we changed the ring posts. Give us more money. Like, no, I'm not a fan of that at all.
Yeah,
I
agree.
I don't even like the DLC packs where it's like, you know, hey, here's this costume, you know, and a couple of other things that you might want, you might not, but you know, that's 10 quid, you know. I'm not a fan of that at all. I think if someone's paid for the game, if someone has paid the full price for the game, then then any money that I'd hope to get from that sale, I've got it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And the only reason I'd be updating the game is well for me as well, but for people who have yet to buy it, I now need to update it so that someone who hasn't bought it yet has a reason to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
But the person who's already bought it, why I wouldn't want to charge them twice or three times, or
Yeah.
So yeah. As far as I'm concerned, it's one game. I obviously I do have going to the future. I do have an idea for a VR version.
Oh wow.
That's I don't know if it'll work. It's just I've got it in my head of I've developed VR games, spent a bit of time developing VR games. So the idea that I've got, it might work, but it might not work, because you're basically going to have to make it so that it's not disorientating, So
good luck with that one.
Yeah.
540 splash is not going to make you feel sick in VR. Definitely not.
Yeah, that would be the stress test. Yeah. But obviously, I don't want to open that can of worms. But just in terms of like going forward, other games, that's the only thing I would consider would be a VR experience, and that would be a separate game. But other than that, there's no. I don't ever want there to be a sequel. I don't ever want there to be paid DLC. I just want it to be free downloads for people that have already purchased it.
Amen to that.
That's brilliant. So let's talk about the online, because you've got a championship belt, a physical championship belt for the online ranking system. What inspired you to kind of integrate that into it?
I think it was probably so going back to No Mercy, the thing that I really loved about No Mercy was the multiplayer. And it's funny for me because I'm someone that actually doesn't really play multiplayer games very much. I tend to, if I buy a game, I tend to, even if it's a multiplayer game, I'll do the single player, like Halo or something. I'll do the single player campaign, and I tend not to bother about the multiplayer. But with No Mercy, I love playing against other people, and the fact that we never got to experience that game in this day and age, with massive multiplayer online, being ranked, because I always thought I was really good, and I'm sure there's other people out there that think that they're really good. So it's like, let's put these two together and see who the best is. So the online mode, the online aspect of it is something that that's what I want to play myself personally. Like, that's what I think will be kind of the most fun experience. As much as I love like the single player career mode is going to be great and all the rest of it, but yeah, the online mode is something that I'm really looking forward to. So, but the idea of the title and having sort of one championship, I'm not sure actually sort of why that sort of came about. I remember I started watching this guy on YouTube who was playing the UFC games, and I think he must be like the number one ranked guy in the world, or at least up there. And he's got a lot of followers, and he's got his big channel, and so this guy's pretty much a celebrity because he's the best in the world at this UFC game. And so I don't know, that just kind of, I think maybe that's where it came from, the idea of, well, if you're going to play online, it's going to be ranked, because you don't want to constantly be matched up with people that are not as skilled as you. You actually want to be matched up with people that are equal in skill. So of course, why would you not then have whoever is the top most ranked? You start thinking, well, if he's the best in the world, then it's wrestling. He should have a championship. So, and then the cool thing about wrestling as well is, because another thing about this online mode, it wouldn't just be a default, you're the best in the world, therefore you get the title. It wouldn't be that. It would be, if you're the best in the world, well, then you're going to have more opportunities to be in line for a title shot. But anything can happen. There could be a guy who wins a qualifier match, like we might have our version of a Royal Rumble, where someone who maybe has only played the game like a handful of times ends up winning this Royal Rumble somehow, and then all of a sudden he's got a title shot with the guy who's actually our world champion.
Yeah.
So I just thought that it just creates lots of opportunities for stories, and then I thought, well, you know, if there's going to be a sort of celebrity status around the guy who's got the championship, then well, why don't we create a weekly show where we can have, like, this is what the whole UPW Blast thing is about. It's like, let's have one environment that's separate from like, you'll still be able to play in it, but let's have an environment that's separate from the rest of the game, that it's not involved in the career mode, because Ultra Pro Wrestling as a company isn't one of the promotions that's in the career mode.
Right.
So it's like a separate thing. It's like basically us as a company saying, this is our presentation. This is like, we're going to see, you know, who the best online players are, and it's going to be held on this weekly show called Blast, and we'll live stream it, whether it's on Twitch or whether we can somehow do. Actually, I was playing around the other day, and I was in the game engine with the camera, and I think just even by accident, I somehow got the camera to sit almost where a crowd member would be sitting, like looking at the. And it just kind of came to me. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool, actually, if you could like log in and watch these online.
You have a position in the crowd.
You have a position, yeah. I don't know, that might be overwhelming for all the connections required for that, but
maybe that's the thing that you do in VR audience members to it.
Yeah. Oh, the possibilities are endless. But yeah, so and then your mind starts going. You're like, oh, well, if we're going to have an actual TV show with a real competitive match for this title belt, so let's have commentators. Let's have people actually, like, real life commentators. They'll talk about the player, because you see it in esports now. Like, you know, you can look up Super Smash Brothers competitions, and it's all taken very seriously. And so why not do that with a wrestling video game, where, you know, you could even, if it gets big enough, you could even have a show where it's like we're at a bar or something, and there's a crowd of people, a big screen, and we've got the commentators actually commentating the match. You know, my mind just starts racing for like the potential of that. I think it could be.
We know a great brewery in Liverpool that might be up for hosting something like that. Shout out to Top Row Brewing.
It's funny that we actually were trying to like brainstorm a like series like that, weren't we, a few months ago?
Very much so. Very much so.
How we were going to do it, but now you've like planted that seed. Might be something else.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely open to any ideas like that, definitely. And then also as well, I started thinking, well, we've got one world title, but you can't really have a show based around one world title and one match. So it's like, well, how do you fill up the rest of the show? Well, of course, we're going to have the tag team titles. We might even have regional specific belts. So there might, if you have a US title, you can make it, because it's all online, and you know where people are from, but you can make it that it has to be people who are US account holders who fight for the US title. So, so you get a real US champion.
That's cool.
Yeah, you get a real UK champion.
Yeah. So, please bring back the European Championship. I've been asking for this for years.
Does D'Lo Brown still have that? Or
I think so. I don't know. Seeing him in about a month, I'll ask him.
In Finland. I take it then with that idea that you're probably going to have crossplay for the online.
Yeah. Well, that would be that would be the goal. Crossplay is still, I think, because it's kind of quite new, and I've not developed anything that has crossplay, so it's still something that I need to make sure I can wrap my head around. But yeah, that would be the goal. If for some reason that's not a possibility, then I guess we'd have to have, like, the PlayStation Championship, the Xbox Championship, like, we'll find a way around it.
Yeah, I'll be awesome. Good belts for sure.
Yeah. Oh, but sorry, yeah. So on the Kickstarter, we have one of the incentives that it's the most expensive incentive. But so I got in contact with a belt company, and I sent them the design, and I said, would this be doable? And they're like, yeah, that's no problem. We can do that. And so I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if anyone will go for that, because it's obviously the more expensive option. But yeah, you'll be able to, on the Kickstarter, order a real replica belt of this Internet Championship, because I'm thinking it will eventually, at some point in the future, become popular. Hopefully, fingers crossed. and it'll be something that collectors and people might actually want, just to have next to their other actual prestigious belts. Here's here's some video game belt as well.
Absolutely. Hey, I've got a mini replica of the up down down title. Like, I'm happy to add to it.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Good stuff, man. That's been wonderful. It's been really insightful, really good to hear, where that's come from, where that seed started, to see it through the processes you've gone through, the passion and the love and stuff you're putting into it. And a lot of the stuff that's currently going on and the stuff you're looking forward to doing and the ideas, it's extremely exciting. Really, really looking forward to playing it, to seeing, where that goes and having involvement there. So thank you so much for your time. Before we go, give you a bit of an opportunity to just kind of promote yourself, the Kickstarter, this, that, and the other. Where can people look that up, get some information and stuff?
So it's I can't quite remember the link for the Kickstarter, but if you go to the website ultraprowrestling.com, everything's there and easily accessible. We only just yesterday launched our Instagram account, so we now have an Instagram account as well. But just, I don't know, anything you can do to support us would be really appreciated. Obviously the Kickstarter is the thing that we're really hoping does well, because right now we have this office, and the office thankfully seems to be getting paid for at least the next for at least 2023.
Fantastic.
So
good stuff. Get yourselves on the Kickstarter, people. Support this, because it's very, very exciting. Where are you on social media? So you said you just started up an Instagram. You're also on Twitter. Where can people find you there?
Twitter is the one that I'm kind of most active on. That's where we've got the most amount of followers just now. That's where I tend to post most. Although now that we've got the Instagram, I think I'll probably post on that more as well, because that also shares to Facebook, and our Facebook is dead. There's I think there's 3 people on there. So if you have a Facebook account, even if you don't use it, go give us a link, just so that no one.
Let's get those numbers up.
Because people are just going to look into what is this Ultra Pro Wrestling, find our Facebook and go, oh, okay, and then move on. The Facebook is in dire need of help. But Twitter's probably the best place for frequent updates and things like that. But we have a TikTok as well, but I'm never really on there.
I still don't understand TikTok.
I didn't understand Instagram until yesterday.
Amazing. Thank you again for your time, Sam. We really, really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, as always, for joining us. If you don't already, do give us a follow on our social media outlets, Untitled Wrestling Podcast on YouTube, Facebook and Instagram, and Untitled Rest Pod on Twitter, Twitch, and Discord. We'll catch you next time, guys. Go and support the Kickstarter. Go and get this thing off the ground. Let's all play it and support an amazing, amazing project. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to Ultra Pro Wrestling.